Despite the push against Israel continuing and more countries deciding to recognize the state of Palestine, putting it in quotes for people on the podcast, uh, Israel is talking increasingly more about occupation or possible annexation of Gaza. This is something we have definitely advocated since the Gaza disengagement about, but definitely since October 7th. And today we'll talk about different parts of it, what the politicians in Israel are saying, what the world is saying, and what the people of Israel are saying, as well as we'll cover a few things around that, including more states willing to recognize the Palestinian state. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today are Marco, Richard, and we should also be joined by Reichel in, let's say, 10 minutes or so, or maybe a little bit later, but a bit into a show. And so yeah, and also we are sponsored by the Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. Amazon link is in the chat and in the description, so you can check it out. Marco, just to jump into you for some of your opening thoughts. So we have different stories we want to cover. So if you want to pick one, just to quick comment on, or if you have something you'd like to start with before I set the conversation.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, the point about reoccupying Gaza. Well, as you mentioned, in 2005, Israel pulled out, got all the settlers that were in Gaza out, all the infrastructure was left behind. People were forced to leave their homes. Israelis forcibly removed from what were their home at that point. And of course, it was handed out to the Gazans, who created a Palestinian state, again, in inverted commas. And what did they do with it? Well, they started digging tunnels. They started hoarding billions for their leaders, who died billionaires, by the way. And they started building a war machine designed to do October 7, designed to destroy Israel and kill as many Jews as they could. Since the very beginning, they started throwing rockets into Israel, and not happy enough that their rockets weren't powerful enough to kill enough Jews, that they organized October 7. So all the leaders, all the people in the world, they call for a Palestinian state. First of all, the Palestinian state already exists, and it's a failed state. It's a genocidal state. It's an Islamic state. It's a state that rewards, in terms of welfare payments, killers of Jews. It's a state like the West Bank's Palestinian Authority, offshoots of the old PLO from the famous Egyptian terrorist who funded it. We've seen violence and hate coming out from it all the time. So to argue now that the Palestinians should be rewarded with the state for having committed October 7th and for killing Jews and never really changing their ways is effectively, yes, is to reward them for their action, to reward them for their hate. And frankly, it's an historical screw up. It's ignoring history, because they had a state, and what did they do with it? They killed Jews. They did October 7th. So, anyone with a bit of self-respect, a bit of self-esteem, and a bit of brains will realize that offering a state to these monsters, to these genocidal Islamists, is just the most stupid thing you could do right now on the planet.
And in all the coverage you've seen of this region in recent couple of years, you've seen such a limited amount, haven't you? Covering the disengagement, covering the extent to which the Palestinians, in inverted commas, were autonomous since 2005 and chose death every time and chose tunnel building and all the rest of it, as Marco just listed there. So it's and yet you've got this willful blindness to refuse to accept any of that. And then to talk as if you're moving into a new phase now where you can create exactly what you had in 2005, more or less, and somehow start again with some different outcome, despite the fact that Hamas is still holding hostages. And even the need to relinquish them becomes completely irrelevant when the statements are about rewarding terrorists with an inverted commas Palestinian state, and that is the only thing that's heard. That's the only thing that's heard across the world. And even Starmer forgets to mention the hostages in his public address and has to add it afterwards. So yeah, does he forget to mention them? Does he not care? Is that not the point? Yeah, all of that's clearly true, isn't it? So the mood music is clearly in one direction at the moment. And when you've got all of these international countries who are working out which week, which day, which press conference they'll drop in the fact that they are going to do the same, then it's clearly heading in one direction. So at the same time, you've got these kind of reports coming out of Israel of depending which articles you read, of course, depending on which parts of the Knesset you focus on, or which reported meetings you choose to concentrate on, you get an impression that they're going to be able to use the threat to annex parts of Gaza as a means for knocking Hamas into shape and getting them to release the hostages. And at the moment, in the wake of everything that Macron and company are doing in favour of Hamas, I don't see that stands a chance, frankly, because those voices are far louder at the moment, much that I regret that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to cover a few things, first we have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. He says great insight from Marco and Richard. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of like dealing with the sort of peace, I made this point yesterday that when you have sort of Israeli leader willing to compromise with Palestinians, willing to, or sort of when it comes to uh, more like selling out the Israeli state, you know, they, and I'm specifically thinking of Yitzhak Rabin, they get killed. Somebody goes out of their way, or specifically the prime minister goes so much out of what the public would want or what one group would want that this is what happens. But show me like one Palestinian leader that tries to sort of go against the people, tries to do something unpopular, tries to do make a hard decision when it comes to, you know, upholding some sort of a peace. You don't see that. They always reward terrorists. This is the kind of population or the kind of representation they pick. When it came to when they had the one free election and they didn't need one more, they decided to elect Hamas, not by plurality, not by some numbers, no, by majority of seats. The majority, and which meant that the parliament of the Palestinian sort of authority or whatever you want to call it is pretty much defunct because they cannot it cannot function anymore. But this is, and secondly they voted in Fatah or the PLO. So again, this is the kind of representation they pick. They want more violence with the Israeli state, and Israel is expected to compromise with them. Maybe we can cover the sort of the recognitions right now. So we have, of course, going back, I think this originally started maybe a few weeks ago when there was a talk about Saudi Arabia doing a conference with France where potentially there could be a recognition of the Palestinian state. Now France is pretty much committed to recognizing the Palestinian state in the September UN general, I don't know what they like, General Assembly annual meetings
I think it's General Assembly, but I'm not sure.
or General Assembly. Basically, the yearly sort of meeting of the UN. That's like a sort of like a big one. So France has committed to recognizing the Palestinian state. I think about a week ago, or no, maybe it was even earlier this week. There was Starmer was going. The Prime Minister of United Kingdom was talking about, well, maybe as part of the ceasefire, we could recognize the Palestinian state. He went from that to saying, unless Israel surrenders, unless Israel commits to a ceasefire, we will recognize the Palestinian state. And now we're seeing both Canada and Australia, as well as Portugal, but I don't care much about Portugal. We see what kind of what do you call them, general secretaries they produce. When it comes to the big ones, I think both Canada and Australia are influential when it comes to recognizing the Palestinian state. Both of them are considering it. Germany as well. I believe the foreign minister is right now visiting Israel, and they've also mentioned something about possible recognition. So it really does seem that uh, basically once, and this was the biggest problem with recognizing the Palestinian state, because as soon as one nation, one Western nation sort of breaks the taboo, now the floods are coming in. Marco?
Yeah, and also it's not an incident, I think. It's not a coincidence that all the states that right now have come out of the woodwork are actually leftist states. You could argue, well, Macron is centrist. Well, no, Macron was actually Minister of Finance in the socialist government of François Hollande a few years ago before he became president. So he is effectively a socialist. And now another spineless socialist that we're forced to listen to is the Anthony Albanese from Australia. He's another lefty who's come out of the woodwork and having smelled some blood in the air and thinking, well, I'm gonna buy myself some popularity among my Muslim voters, given that Australia has been invaded from Indonesia by lots and lots of Muslim people recently. So he has to play to his audience, just like Keir Starmer's doing. Keir Starmer is not an ideological person. His only purpose in life is to destroy and reverse Brexit. That's why he's lining up himself back to the European Union. And of course, it is Macron's little bitch. What Macron says, Starmer does it. So no surprise there. But again, it's also playing to his Muslim votes because his party is in serious trouble. There is a splinter right now going on within his own party with the extremist Islamophiles on the left who are threatening to set up their own camp. So again,
Did they pick a name yet? I
no, I
know
mean
or is that a new one?
they're so incompetent they actually haven't got a name for it.
Oh.
Right now it's called Your Party. It's like, you know, insert name here party. But yeah. And then you also have, I think it's quite interesting that Mark Carney from Canada is another lefty, hidden in capitalist clothes, if you like. He used to be the chairman of the Bank of England. I used to be a chairman of the Bank of Canada. So he pretends to be an economic guy, but actually he's just another little socialist twerp, really. What I was going to say is that the big absent here, the super socialist du jour, is actually Pedro Sanchez from Spain. He hasn't said anything, partially because he's so wrapped up in different scandals, corruption scandals that his party is involved in. His wife is just look up Pedro Sanchez's wife scandal. You'll find all sorts of ridiculous stuff. His father-in-law, his chairman of his party, and some ministers in his cabinet, and of course, by extension, I guess he's involved as well. But never mind. So all these people are probably too busy to protect their own house in order to go after Palestine right now. But they join the party. Don't worry about it. Anti-Semitism in the air. Yeah, these people are quite happy to join. And it's quite interesting the stance from Merz. Merz, of course, is a more conservative side of the spectrum. Although, for a German, it's very hard to join an anti-Jewish coalition. So I don't know what kind of somersaults that they're going to engage in order to join the rest of the socialist world in order to hate Israel. But in a minute we can talk about how it's pointless anyway. Occupy Gaza or not, if Israel doesn't decide to fight for itself, you can occupy Gaza as much as you like, but not gonna turn
Yeah, I
out well.
mean, maybe just one more thing to add about the sort of the Germany part, because I think I'm again trying to remember now. All my dates are messed up, but because of how quickly everybody changes their position. But I think just a week ago, Merz was saying that basically there will be no recognition anytime soon. Now, I guess I think I made this point that soon is relative, but I didn't imagine soon means like a month. Usually, or like a week basically, but month
Well,
if it comes in September.
they say that a week is a long time in politics, and there you go.
Yeah, I think the foreign minister, the latest words out of the German foreign minister are it's not the right time, which means it's a few minutes to the right time, which means that we'll be joining the rest in September when the herd has become large enough for us to disappear among it and not stand out. That's the likely path, I would say. And again, it's just none of it is pushing in the other direction. It's all pushing in the same direction to different extents, depending on which press conference you're talking about, which is part of the problem. And of course, even Starmer's comments that, caveating his statements with unless Israel dot dot dot, which basically means unless Israel does the impossible and defeats itself by, capitulating to everything he wants, then there is no way that it doesn't mean we endorse a Palestinian state. That's what it means. The unless Israel is to be utterly ignored and frankly ridiculed with a bunch of ludicrous conditions attached to it, which are loose, immeasurable, and utterly unachievable anyway, and undesirable for any country that wishes to frankly survive. So there's all that, and then of course there's the other side of what's going on. Things like the Arab League, for example, which is taking the other pincer movement. Again, that's got the paw prints of the French all over it because they've been herding them into their position, which is to announce that Hamas should give up for the first time. Why for the first time? Really, it's taken you till now to recognize that Hamas should give up. But what they really mean is they want the Palestinian Authority to have control of Gaza. They want to make sure that Israel does not have any control whatsoever or any security whatsoever. And of course, all this smacks of is just, taking the Islamism that you've got at the moment and rebranding it in Islamism in a suit instead. Or a slightly milder form of Islamism that looks more palatable on the camera, but amounts ultimately and eventually to the same thing. It's like they want to take Hamas and treat it like a Quango by rebranding it, giving it a new logo and a new name and saying it's completely different, like a new government department, when it clearly, is based on the same ideology and would act ultimately in the same manner. And to pretend otherwise is to ignore all of the lessons since 2005, for one, and all of the events that have taken place both in Gaza and in the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that's sort of like statement or declaration from the Arab League. Again, they sort of for the first time they said, October 7 was a horrible tragedy. I'm not sure what words they used, but yeah, I mean, them saying that and then saying, yeah, it was bad, but okay, let's give a reward to the people who committed that. It doesn't mean anything. It's the same. This is like, think of it exactly the same as the Israel has a right to defend itself, but it's the exact same thing. No, you don't mean it. You don't actually mean for this is a relationship advice. It's not enough to say sorry. They need to recognize what they've done and they need to remedy the situation. They need to plan out the future that wouldn't make this happen again. This is not what's being done here. Palestinian Authority was already in Gaza, and currently Palestinian Authority is not even strong enough to control their own Area A. They are not even capable enough. Basically, outside of Ramallah, the Palestinian Authority has increasingly diminishing control because they are simply not capable. And only governments can come in together and say, okay, let's give this organization that is unable to do anything, let's give them more things. Maybe they figure it out somehow. And the Mahmoud Abbas is playing perfectly into that when he said, okay, maybe we'll consider stop giving money to our people for killing Jews. The EU was like, take a few billions. I mean, we cannot, we didn't even expect, we were not even planning to get this concession. So yeah, take all the money you need. And this is exactly the same. there is nothing even like marginally better about the Palestinian Authority. It's the fact that they haven't committed a recent big terrorist attack. That's why they are being put forward. Uh, so
They don't
yeah,
need to cause an October 7 because every single day there is a car driven by some young Arab in the West Bank directed to a group of soldiers. Even the other day there was a I mean you can find out about this incident just reading whatever news outlet you want, but they're not flagged up. You don't want to show the Arabs that actually the evil side in this thing because obviously most of the media, most of the governments are supporting, for some reason, the Islamic side. I mean, talk about supporting your enemies.
And of course, they're also not showing the other kind of footage, which goes alongside all of the footage of aid and all of that stuff, which is the fact that Hamas are still fighting. They're still crawling in and out of tunnels. They're still trying to fire RPGs at troops and kill as many Jews as possible. And those those fighters are still super well fed and doing everything that they can to kill and maim Jews wherever possible. And yet that is the side of it that's completely dropped, of course, in any of the coverage. And as is, of course, any sympathy, any real genuine sympathy for the innocent people taken hostage and still held hostage. So, I mean, it doesn't stack up whichever way you look at it.
we have a super chat from Jeff. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. And so I think we mentioned this earlier, but basically, Ma'arif Daily has reported on Monday that Netanyahu has been presented with annexation proposal for in a meeting with a small group of ministers to basically designate special territories in Gaza that would be annexed, would become a part of Israel, would be or sort of would be fully administered by Israel. And this was said is one of the several options. And it comes from basically the fact that Hamas is pretty much no longer negotiating, or there is no serious negotiation going on, which I think it's a great thing that there is no negotiation going on. I think it's a bad thing, the fact that it's because of Hamas that no negotiation is going on, because, well, one, it means Israel is still considering negotiations, and two, Hamas knows it has the upper hand because of how much pushback there is from the world. Now, this push against Israel wouldn't be enough if Israel was willing to stand for itself. If Israel was willing to say, no, we will continue to going into Gaza, we will do what is necessary. But unfortunately, it looks like even despite these like annexation proposals, the fact is that Israel is now allowing or is dropping or is airdropping humanitarian aid, is offering for more countries to join if they want to do so, and uh, is trying to basically fight against the propaganda that there is no enough aid going in by allowing more aid in. But the fact is, there is more than enough aid going in. The problem is not enough aid. It never has been a problem, and I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have mentioned it, but there was a internal mail from was it BBC yeah, that basically they've talked about that it doesn't matter how much aid goes in, we will keep talking about this. So yeah, Israel needs to realize this is not about aid. This is about the fact that as long as Israel will continue defending itself, it will never be enough. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, just a year ago, a year ago, can you believe it? We were talking about the daring rescue of the Argamani, the
And
girl,
Noah.
Noah Argamani, and the other two hostages. And in a relatively short time, Israel seems to have done incredible work to defending itself, incredible work to hit Hezbollah and all that kind of stuff, and moving into into Rafah and this kind of actions that looked like they were finally going for Hamas and getting rid of them. But then, a year later, we're here talking about Netanyahu floundering, trying to work out what to do with it. Obviously, to occupy Gaza right now is an incredible task. Gaza is still a maze of tunnels. Terrorists are still hiding, as Richard pointed out. They're still coming out and attacking convoys, attacking soldiers, killing soldiers, booby trapping areas. So it's a really, really dangerous situation for the Israeli soldiers on the ground. The only thing you should do to Gaza right now is flatten it, bomb it, destroy everything. I mean, let's not forget that the reason why people are going without food again is because they're not surrendering. Is because the people who caused October 7 in the first place, people who started the war, are still fighting nearly 2 years after. So it's on them again. We said a number of times, but in case you missed it, it's on them. They caused all this. They caused October 7, and they have to pay for it. And if they don't want to pay for it, they can just surrender, just lay down their arms, surrender the hostages, and surrender their leadership so they can be punished. But they're not going to do that, are they? This is Islamism. This is a religious fundamentalist craziness that poison their minds. So unless they're taught how to behave in a civilized society, how to be civilized, they're never going to change their mind. You cannot negotiate with terrorism because terrorism has only one goal: to terrorize people and kill and murder.
I think a lot of what you're seeing at the moment in terms of the reports is designed to, frankly, mislead or to give you enough of a hook for you to attach what you want to it and to like the reports that you prefer. I mean, we've talked, Razi himself has mentioned many times the fact that Netanyahu gives a different message in English than he does in Hebrew. And you see that when it comes to the messages on the aid provision, for example. And when they're talking about annexing Gaza or that there are possible, reports which suggest that isn't off the table or some such vacuous comment, which basically means that, well, we might do that, but they won't because they're not putting any weight behind it whatsoever, and that's just there as a little it's a bonus point to people who would like to see that happen. It's a little something to attach your hope to, even though it's not being integrated into a coherent strategy that is in any way part of what they're planning at the moment, at the same time as they're supplying aid to their enemy. So, I mean, how you can argue both cases. And then you take the reports which focus on what Ben Gvir or Smotrich have said lately and what they would prefer to happen. And that's presented as if it's the Israeli position, which sometimes is used for people, on our side of the argument to argue that some of what they say would be exactly what you should do. But of course, that isn't the position of the Israeli government, and frequently that's yet another technique for distracting you from what they actually are doing, which is sadly in many ways precious little in terms of fighting back the propaganda that Hamas is sadly successfully managing to inflict upon the world and deceive the world with.
Yeah, I mean, just one comment on the sort of there is this like focus on the Western of the Western media on what Ben Gvir and Smotrich say, and again, try to like apply it to like any other situation. Oh, do you want to know about the American position on Iran? Well, let's listen to Scott Bessent. That doesn't make any sense. They don't have like he has nothing to do with the foreign policy or even domestic policy, really, for that matter, when it comes to handling sort of certain situations. So, which again, Smotrich is a finance minister. He's not a defense minister. He's not a foreign minister. He has nothing to do when it comes to waging the war in Gaza, despite beyond the sort of like supplying his votes to the government. I should also mention Iyar Reichel is joining us. Yeah, Iyar, any of your opening thoughts about either what you've heard or I can bring in a new topic if you'd like.
I'm about to bring in a new topic, so I wouldn't say the things that have already been said.
Sure. So we have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. And one of the interesting thing that I've seen is the fact that there was a poll commissioned by Israel Hayom and done by Magar Mochot, who have conducted that after 20 years since disengagement, Israeli public at large, or sort of majority of Israeli public, supports going back into Gaza. Iyar, what do you make of that?
Well, there has like for many decades there has been a war against the minds of Israeli people. It was led by intellectuals, by military officials, by just like state bureaucrats, media outlets, etc., etc. Basically, telling Israelis they're at fault for the situation of those that aim to destroy them. It's not about the ideology of Palestinism. It's about Israelis giving not good enough materialistic conditions for them, or not giving them enough respect, or all kind of excuses. And the climax of this propaganda campaign was the late 90s until the early 2000s. In a time period of less than 15 years, from 1993 to 2005, Israel has made a major political change, a major change in the facts. If you look at 1992, Israel held Judea and Samaria and Gaza, and the military was basically running the place and ensuring civil rights over there. Palestinians in those occupied areas could not vote, but they've had leadership and they've had civil rights. And then Israelis decide, and in this time period of 15 years, they gave up a lot of parts of Judea and Samaria and the entirety of Gaza in a gradual process. And that stemmed from the Israeli guilt, from the false guilt, from the view that if we do that and we give up ourselves to the Palestinians, which is basically Arabs that hold the ideology of Palestinism, then peace will come. And I've discussed about it in previous shows. It's about peace as a primary. It's about the morality of altruism. It's about materialism. It's about many things. But the things that worked in the 90s and the early 2000s could not work in the days and years after October 7th, 2023. This is just unavoidable. And yes, the propaganda machines are making new tricks. Oh, we should have better defense. It's because we didn't have good defenses, and it's because of Bibi, and it's because next time it wouldn't happen, and next time we'll have credit to defeat them. It's always the same. It's like upgrading of lies and reversing cause and effect and evasion. But as I said in previous shows, this is unavoidable. You can Israelis can no longer lie to themselves that it's their fault, and they can no longer lie to themselves that the Palestinians want peace and that we're the obstacle. Like, yeah, it worked. And by the way, it's not like the propaganda machine convinced everyone. I think the majority of the Israelis don't think this way. But when you do some political tricks and you do aggressive campaigns and lie to the people so they might, like, for the very least, like, not resist it when it's happening. So let's say back in the day, it was like the country was quite divided. I think today it's mostly the Israeli fringe who still holds this opinion, like the hardcore ultra left that just, like, shifts reality based on their narrative. But of course, the right wing Israelis like want to end the story, want to defeat the idea of Palestinism. And the ideas in the center of the Israelis in the center of the political map are now leaning towards right wing. I personally know a lot of people in Israel who are traditionally left wing, in the sense, like, we'll do whatever we can for peace, and we should make some sacrifices for peace and whatever. Like, after October 7th, they're like, hell no, and then this is over. And yeah, some of them are starting to rationalize back, but there is a majority in Israel that will not accept it anymore. And this is pretty much makes sense. Like after such horrible attack, and you see how the world reacts to it, you see how pro-Palestinians react to it, you see how Israeli citizens who are define themselves as Palestinians react to it, you understand there is a very deep issue here. Like you cannot run away from this understanding. And still, there is still a propaganda machine against Israel, including mainstream media in Israel, including intellectuals in Israel, trying to make Israel give up itself even more under all kind of dirty emotional campaigns. But I'm convinced it's not going to work for them. The only question is how far can we go with this war? Are we really capable of doing what it takes to make Palestinianism surrender in Gaza, which is Hamas and its supporters and basically the people there who gives it moral sanction? That's the major question, because it takes more than what we've been doing thus far. Are Israelis capable to give moral sanction to the extra step? I don't know. There has been some demand, but this demand has not managed to get to the mainstream. The mainstream is still kind of gray about it. Of course, the mainstream media is hell no. Like, the mainstream media in Israel launching propaganda about as if Israel it has moral responsibility to the alleged starvation in Gaza. So it's really about, the common Israeli understanding what's right and demanding it. And this is an extremely difficult task. This is a huge challenge. And I don't know.
Something I wanted to bring up. First, somebody in the chat says that there is also a lot of pro-Israel propaganda, and depending on who you ask, American media is too pro-Israel. Yeah, if you ask a bunch of jihadis what they think about like the war coverage by American media, yeah, they think existence of Jews. If you believe that Jews shouldn't be killed right now, you are being too pro-Israel in their eyes. So we don't usually care about what these people say when it comes to sort of their view of reality. And of course, there's always the objective reality. There's always what is the actual fact. We don't deal with everything by the subjective interpretation of every single person. If the way to get peace with Palestinians is accept their delusion that they were kicked out of their land and that land is somehow theirs, you can never have a society if you live in the delusion of others, if you live in the like irrational way the Arab states are currently organizing their societies. You cannot deal with that, or you're compromising your own values. You are calling for destruction of yourself. Just a few more things from the poll. So 76% responded that that Israel erred in implementing the disengagement unilaterally. Now, this can be taken in a different way, because some people who might answer that might say, well, Israel should have discussed with the Palestinians about how it's going to be done. But generally, something interesting I've seen is 20% of left-wing sort of people support occupation of Gaza, which it's still found like a relatively high number with the amount of defeatism usually that comes from the Israeli left. Marco, any thoughts about any more thoughts about this?
Well, yeah, I'll quote from Atlas Shrugged, by the essence and nature of existence, contradiction cannot exist. And it's not good to want Israel occupying Gaza again if you then, at the same time, you literally providing food to your enemies. You cannot be prepared to take over Gaza, but then treat it in an altruistic way like poor victims They've been, we should be very careful not to offend them or whatever. You cannot fight a war by not fighting a war. You either fight a war or you're losing to your enemies. You cannot reach an agreement on this. So yes, it's fine. I'm glad the Israelis are waking up to the fact that your enemies are out there to kill you. They don't want to be your friends. But if they then don't give themselves the morality headroom, if you like, to do what's required to do, if you haven't got the right ideas that allows you to take the right actions, well, all this is pointless. And it's true. In the short term, having experienced the trauma of October the 7th, the atrocity committed on that day, most of the people are, okay, well, we should be harder on the Palestinians. But are they really ready to reject altruism? Are they really ready to go for their own self-interest? I hope so, because otherwise there's not going to be a way out at all.
I mean, the fact that the majority in 72%, your first figure, recognize that the disengagement's been a colossal failure is already not as high as it should be, because how can you not argue it's not been a colossal failure with what the subsequent events of October the 7th and what the Palestinians did with the 20 years that they had the amount of control of Gaza that they did. And I think to reiterate Marco's point on the 52% wanting to occupy Gaza, but if that's going to mean the IDF just being there handing out Happy Meals, and occupying Gaza with hope and love and optimism, it's doomed to utter failure, because you're not recognizing the violent nature of what has driven the Gazans for so long and continues to drive them to this day. And that is not going to vanish. That's not going to disappear overnight. And how can you possibly even advocate such a strategy when they're holding your innocent people in tunnels underground and in cages? How can you even suggest that that's a possible strategy? And I think at the moment you're seeing, I made this point the other day in a slightly different form, but at the moment you're seeing such a gathering together of people across the world to attack Israel, following on from Israel removing one of the biggest threats to world peace by delaying, not entirely taking out, but certainly significantly delaying Iran's ability to fire a nuclear weapon. And that has emboldened those people who want to defend Islamism to come out and do so, because they no longer have the threat of Islamism is going to release a nuclear weapon next week. So we can work for them. That's the way they seem to be thinking. We can do their propaganda for them because this is the space in which we can do it. So we can fully let our anti-Semitism let rip. We can fully attack Israel. That's what so many of these leaders of countries, the media, the academia are all gathered in the same pen trying to achieve at the moment. And yet it's only when Israel is bold, it's only when Israel is militarily strong and confident, and of course it stops attacking its enemies too early every time for the same fault, the fault of altruism, which means that the war is never actually won, it's only delayed for today. And in that vacuum, the propaganda takes hold, the anti-Israel propaganda.
Yeah, and it's sort of going on in the chat as well, because somebody in the chat is saying, well, look, now even Canada, even UK, even Australia are sort of recognizing the Palestinian state or planning to recognize the Palestinian state or discussing it or whichever. But again, this is like such an inverted like view of morality and of justice. The fact that you would focus on the fact of, well, what are these irrational people doing about the proper actions of Israel? We should judge the world. We should discuss it by that standard. No, you should always think first, what is right? And then if the world goes against you, you have a choice. Do you want to appease the irrationality and risk wiping yourself out? Because what is the alternative here? Like the sort of the good solution that the West is proposing now would most likely allow Hamas to stay in Gaza. So, and even if not, it would mean that would still be a different kind of terrorist organization, or a different kind of, like, even if you implemented somehow a complete return of the Palestinian Authority, that's an authoritarian state. This is not some kind of like paradise of freedom that would come there. So again, Israel needs to realize that they don't really have much choice when it comes to doing what is necessary. It's you either do what is necessary or you will compromise, and you're risking pretty much anything that can come from irrationality. Maybe I can mention one more thing. We haven't talked about Trump much, but something he recently he said when it comes to sort of the both the breaking up of the communications with Hamas, breaking out of the deal, as well as the humanitarian aid. He commented, Hamas did a horrible thing and they paid a big price. I always said, when you get down to the last 20 or 10, talking about the hostages, they won't release them because it's like their shield. It's very unfair, so something's going to have to be done. They were really unwilling to talk. We got a lot out, and now possibly the fight will have to be a little bit different. I told Bibi, you're going to have to do it a different way. Now, we don't necessarily hear from Trump what he's thinking that Israel should do, but what do you make of Trump's comments? The fact is that because of how irrational the world is right now, even his sort of at some points almost neutrality about this is like so much more positive than whatever is coming out from the world.
Well, I think Trump hates Palestinism. He wouldn't say it explicitly, but basically he's seen the horrors of October 7th. He knows what is Islamism. He understands. He knows the Iranian Islamic regime tried to murder him several times. Having said that, he wants to remain popular. He wants to gain support of the masses. So he wants to avoid death in a very pragmatistic way. And he wants Israel to finish the job. He wants Israel to win in Gaza. But on the other hand, he wants Israel to do it without casualties to the Palestinians, in effect, or in an amount that will not actually allow Israel to win. And this is a contradiction. And you know, the Trump administration, on the one hand, is basically crucial to Israel's survival and did many things that without them we would have been in a very bad situation right now. On the other hand, there are a lot of breaks and limits we receive from this regime because of deals, because of relationships with other countries, because the pragmatic attempt to avoid casualties for Israel's enemies. And this is very tough. It's a very tough situation. And once again, the root of it all is the worldview of the majority of the people, the worldview that is prominent in a culture. And this is relevant for the United States. It's relevant for European countries. It's relevant for Israel. This is the root. And once we do what we got to do, and we do it with pride, and we end this swiftly, it will solve a lot of problems. But as long as this is not being done, there is a huge struggle, an ideological struggle in process.
Ginger, a member in the chat, said also a consortium of Arab leaders have come out against Gaza and supporting Israel. Maybe Trump's influenced by that. Love to hear you talk about this. We mentioned it a bit earlier, but again, basically the whole idea is, yeah, we say this is bad, but, and that but is basically we advocate for the same thing to happen again. So they said, they criticized October 7th for the first time ever, the Arab League, and then said we need a two-state solution, which effectively means we want October 7th to happen again. We want Palestinians to get another chance at wiping out Israel. I mean, specifically when it comes to what UN has been talking about, they've talked also about the right of return for all Palestinians, which again would mean about 8 million Arabs going back to Israel proper. And we're not talking about Arab Israelis, which even those are questionable when it comes to the existence of Israel, and they are advocating for basically completely flipping the demographics on Israel into full-on Islamist majority country. This is not this is not like saying October 7th was bad. You are not realistic. So yeah, Marco, any comments on this or what Trump said, or any other last thoughts since we're wrapping up?
But first of all, I'd like to point out how ridiculous is the surprise that the media and politicians seem to find when Hamas doesn't stick to the rules, when Hamas doesn't sit down around the table and agrees in a civilized way. Woohoo, they're a bunch of jihadis. Why would you trust them in the first place? And then, when they pull the rug from under your feet, well, is there a surprise, really? They should never be put in the situation where they can actually play a diplomacy card, where they can be seen as being reasonable, because these people are total irrationality in human form. They choose death at every turn. They have a very clear ideology, and this ideology is destroy the Jews and make Islam the only rule for human life, which is not life at all. It's pure slavery, despite what they like to make it sound here in the West. So, Trump really could do a much better job in helping Israel with the propaganda. When Trump says stuff like, "Oh, we're seeing the famine in the picture," of those things, it's actually causing more damage than a help to Israel. It's actually more damaging than not providing weapons to Israel, because you're effectively giving credence to the propaganda that comes from the Arab Palestinian side. You're providing ammo to all the cretins like Starmer and all his friends in the WEF club, who then come down and justify sanction towards Israel, which is it's not a good thing. Because ultimately, again, how many times can you point it out that Israel is the only democratic state in the Middle East? Everything else is either dictatorship, absolute monarchy, or some sort of failed state, or whatever nature you like. So why would you support? Why would you not come in aid to the only democratic state, the state where you can be protected, whatever your religion, race, sexuality, all this kind of stuff? I mean, again, it's not a surprise that there is what's it called? A pride party in Tel Aviv and not one in Gaza. That you cannot come out for the monsters. You cannot reward the people who want destruction, the people who push for the end of civilization. It just staggers me that people in the West would actually suck up to this kind of propaganda, because in the end, what are they actually pushing? They're pushing return to the Middle Ages, they're pushing death, they're pushing slavery, they're pushing the end of freedom. So, I mean, what kind of brain will go down that route? And again, I think people like Trump, people who see that the good is on the side of Israel, should be a bit more careful when they talk about stuff, and should be a bit more open in being supporting Israel, not just on a material basis, but on a moral basis. The fact that a free state, a state that allows more freedom and individual rights, is a much, much better state than one that advocates slavery, really.
I think Trump gets it on a loose, basic level, but the problem is that his policy and statements are the product of whatever news imagery he's seen in the last 10 minutes. And that reactive response to a bit of perception of some imagery, regardless of who it's come from and how it's framed. Particularly in the case of all this faked up and exaggerated stuff coming from Hamas about Gaza itself, then that's what leads to some of these stupid statements, and that is deeply unhelpful, and of course not what you want in the leader of the free world. You want a considered, conceptual, integrated, properly thought out policy that's based on an objective morality at its very basic level. And I think that that is sadly, and not a great surprise, it's missing from what you're seeing at the moment, and that's what makes it kind of ebb and flow with based on what the latest events are. And of course, at the moment, all you're hearing, in some of the newspaper articles, some of the talk is about should we have floating hospitals across the the shore of on the shore of Gaza? Should the IDF be dropping with their aid packages pictures of the hostages and informing Gazans that if they make effort to hand over the hostages, they'll be rewarded, and all this kind of stuff is there's tinkering around the edges, and there's constant concentration on altruism and of course rewarding in one form or another the terrorists who enacted it in the first place, enacted the situation we're in the first place. Then how are you going to move on? How are you going to learn anything from it? You're literally dancing around the problem the whole time and evading the center of it, and that's what we're constantly trying to point out on these shows.
And where can people find you?
You can check out the Briefly Objective, which is linked in the description below. Lots of short form material with added imagery to really emphasize the point, and it's added imagery with a conceptual argument to really make sure it's clear what we're talking about, unlike the stuff I was just referring to.
Yar, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Thank you for having me. I'm Yar Reichel. I'm an associate of the Ayn Rand Center Israel. Please visit aynrand.org.il/about. And I'm also a leading member in the Victory Now movement. We are writing a book called Victory Now. It's both in English and in Hebrew. Its goal is to present a plan for Israel's victory and the moral case for it. As I said, the moral case is the starting point. It's the essential. It's what we need to. This is like the intellectual war we're fighting. As long as we'll manage to convince as much people in the moral case for Israel, the easier it will be for Israel and the Western world to win. Please visit www.victory.now.
And with that, thank you everybody for watching today. You should also check out the Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy, the sponsor of this episode. The link to the Amazon link is pinned in the chat, and I'm also just going to repost it now. So here you go, and it's also in the description. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.